Why don't you start, Greg?
Okay. Greg Hallinan, the co-founder and head marketing guy, basically at Verve Mobile. We are a location-based mobile advertising platform that is focused on local media and premium local media. So we, because of that, power more than 3,500 local media brands, many of which are in the room with us this morning. And we have an interesting vantage point, because not only are we powering their local businesses that are buying and selling locally, but we run literally hundreds of campaigns each month for national brands that are looking to do just what you alluded to earlier in terms of location targeting.
It's interesting, too, when we talk about location targeting, often the knee-jerk reaction is we're talking about SMBs, but really I think, it's the opportunity of both helping national brands go local and then also bring it down market, accessible to SMBs. Do you work with kind of both sides of that coin as well? Tell us a little bit about XAD.
Yeah, absolutely. First, we're partners with Verve, thank you. And also want to say that the data you guys are putting is helping the industry a lot in terms of investment in the local space. Local is mobile and it's growing, and there's a lot of money to be made. So our business is seeing that. We can also chart XAD revenues with the growth of usage, and it's great. So a little bit about XAD. We're a local mobile ad network. We focus 100% on location and 100% on mobile. We're, I would imagine, the largest. We're looking at 15 billion impressions a month. We partner with Verve and a lot of local assets. Pandora is a big partner of ours, Weather Channel. And what we do is we measure performance for both, like you mentioned, SMBs and national advertisers. And we have about 1.2 to 1.4 million advertisers in the system at any given point, which gives us a lot of data on what works, what doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. So let's start off by talking about an announcement or a product launch you announced recently, which is basically to make the geofence, which is a term we all hear about, and the technology is improving, the data is improving. You guys have put something out interesting that makes it kind of more of a granular area of targeting than what's been traditionally done. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we started this project of essentially doing location at scale, first challenge was, if I get a location from a partner, like let's say Pandora, do I know that location is accurate or not?
Right.
So first challenge is, do I know where you are? And, we started mapping locations on a map, and we saw some developers were sending us locations for their servers in Kansas. So everybody was in Kansas. Well, if you start with wrong information, all your campaign objectives will not be met. So we came up with a technology called Smart Location to first figure out where you are and also do probabilistic models on where you're going. So if you're on a freeway, your location is changing around the path, figure that out, right? So now, if location is dynamic because you're on your phone and you're moving around, then the fences that are the campaign criteria should be dynamic as well. And everybody in the industry was doing these circles around radiuses. Oh, how much do you want? 5-mile radius or 10-mile radius? Like, come on, seriously, that's there's no context, in that. So what we did was we came up with a technology called Smart Fence, which takes a few things into account. One is, the fence shouldn't be a circular fence, as this, diagram illustrates. It should be a fence of activity, and the activity and the fence should change based on, what criteria is in that location. If, for example, if you're actually drinking coffee in the morning, and then if you're, doing dinner at night, you're moved from one place to the other. And if I'm targeting you as a user, then my fence should be dynamically changing from morning to evening. That's one example. Two is, there's search activity that's going on in that area. So we're actually drawing a fence that allows us to not just draw a location around a business, but also look at, like Home Depot as a customer. If you're doing searches for plumbing or some things like that, I want to make sure I target Home Depot searches in your neighborhood, as also I fence Home Depot. So Smart Fencing is a technology we launched just to make sure that the click-through rate, which is what you mentioned is higher on mobile, keeps going up because we do less ad waste, we put less impressions out there and get a higher return for the advertisers.
Sure. And so this is a question for both of you, because Greg, I know you're also doing a lot with fencing, different locations, and we actually have a graphic here that I'll let you speak to as well. But first I'll ask, in a lot of this kind of location targeting, sometimes, I alluded to this earlier, what is sometimes sacrificed is sheer reach, which a lot of brand advertisers have kind of held as a KPI for a long time. So how do you kind of make sure that you're achieving scale while also kind of segmenting audiences in this way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I think there's a lot of not misinformation, but confusion around some of the terminology, which you started to allude to. And actually, both of our companies worked with the IAB earlier this year to put together a white paper, a buyer's guide, if you will, on location-based targeting, which helps to define the terminology, right? So a little bit about the terminology. Geofence, geo-aware are tossed out frequently.
Yep.
Geofence is essentially, like it sounds, fixating your targeting based on a physical point.
Yep.
Whereas geo-aware is fixating on the device itself.
So it's a moving geo-target,
essentially. It's a moving geo-target in that sense. So what we do here, and what it's not dissimilar to what XAD does, we have a service we call the Verve Location Service, where we take all these different inputs, and we're fortunate because of the construct of our network is such that it is local information. So people are disclosing their location. So when you mention, most on average is about 10%.
Yep.
Our fidelity is actually about 50%.
Nice.
It's much, much higher simply because of the nature of our content.
Yep.
And because of that, we score every impression for a given location accuracy. And based on that score, we'll modify the targeting around that, all designed to achieve that same sort of relevance and in essence, click-through rate or engagement rate, whatever metric you want to apply. And by doing that, we also achieve some scale, right? Because you highlight the fact that the scalability, look, if you're getting down to that city block or tighter, you start to just target yourself right out of an audience.
Yeah.
So when we run campaigns, and for example, we did more than a dozen over just the Black Friday holiday period right now with retail. These are all national advertisers. They all have a local retail presence.
Absolutely.
Thousands of line items in those campaigns. And these are all seven-figure campaigns. They are spending real dollars against this. And what we find is that we combine both some of those location across that physical aspect as well as with some geo-aware. And that gives some flexibility to optimize around that, which I think is what Dee was referring to.
No, that's a great point. And I think also not only where the ad is showing up, but you guys are both working on interesting ways to kind of localize ads in other sense. So, the ad creative, different calls to action. I actually have slides for both of you guys on this one. Let's stick with you, Greg, because we're already kind of within your slides here.
Sure.
You guys are doing a lot, depending on where the ad shows up, the creative itself and the calls to action.
Yeah, I think it's also important not only to define the terms and understand what the terminology means, but also recognize that location in mobile. Now that we're migrating to this post-PC world, and we're living in a mobile world, in a mobile construct, location is the new data set.
Yeah.
And where we used cookies before on desktop and we're sort of kind of targeting the machine, in this case, location is used not just for location targeting itself, but actually is the key that unlocks all the other capabilities of audience targeting, right? Because at the end of the day, good quality advertising is about relevance. You increase the relevance, you increase the meaning, you increase the utility, you increase the value to me as a consumer. So what we do, and really 85% of our campaigns are location targeted. And what I mean by that is they're using location to do things like Wrigley's here with Orbits, where not only do we provide some utility to, hey, where you can get orbits near you, but this was targeted around predictive models. So we used predictive audience clusters and a really interesting execution where it was post-dinner time around bars and nightclubs and areas where young people would congregate. And I just had that heavy garlic meal. I need to get some gum, right? And that's literally how they kind of structured this whole campaign nationally. And by creating small things that are dynamically generated, which is what we're doing and what we're doing right now, you increase that relevancy score. So now in this case, you're using location, not just to local target specific regions and places, but also unlock audience clusters around.
Yeah, and I think using location as a proxy to define audiences and profile audiences is also interesting because it gets past some of those humps of adoption of national advertisers, because then you're speaking the language that they've done for years, which is demographic profiling. Dee, anything to add on what you guys are doing in terms of creative and localizing ads, not just where it shows up, but what it says?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a good slide to sort of hone into what you're saying. The creative here was it's actually the company's there was basically taking not just location into context, but also weather and time changes. So in the morning you serve a hot coffee, in the evening do cold coffee, and if the weather is whatever it's doing, and you change accordingly. But ultimately, look, what I want to say is, the creative work that is done for all these ads shows higher performance. Ultimately, it's all about showing higher performance to advertisers compared to a non-locally targeted campaign. And we put out, billions of ads every month, which are all real-time generated. Either they're agency campaign with an overlay of location, overlay of weather, or whatever else, or they're SMB campaign that are HTML5 generated and taking that context and content into account. Now, but the whole point, I think, of the audience here is like location, bringing location to your creative. And having an ad like that's 1.2 mile away, not 25 mile away, and knowing where the user is will improve click-through rates, will improve call rates, will improve generally your campaign objectives.
Mm-hmm. So before I ask the last question, I'll signal the next two guys to come up, Renee and David. You can kind of come on up to the back here, and we'll launch right into the next segment. So based on all these kind of best practices that you guys are espousing, what kind of analytics can you report in terms of performance? I went through some just generic examples of how location targeting indeed can boost performance. Anything you guys have to add to that you're seeing from your kind of network performance?
Yeah, I think you're seeing increased engagement rates, right? I mean, for national brand advertisers are looking for rich media ad units, dynamic creative, and when you combine those two things, there are things within the creative and within the landing experiences, whether those are microsites or landing pages, et cetera, that are being measured. And I think some of the most useful ones, or not useful, but some of the most interesting ones are ad units. They're speaking to the lower end of the funnel. So not only do we do brand at the top end of the funnel, but bringing them down to where now a mobile device, the ad unit, the relevancy is creating utility for me as a user.
Yeah.
And that's directions, that's schedule. We did a lot of political advertising this year, and a lot of that was nearby rallies and making sure you put that on your calendar so you know where it is and how to get there. Those kind of things are high conversion engagement rates.
And those types of lower funnel activities not only, I think, have to signal a change in the way things are targeted or the creative used, but also how it's measured. I think that, that starts to get into different conversations with advertisers that have kind of a comfort blanket on looking at things like CPMs as opposed to CPA, but that's kind of an overall industry learning curve. Last word, D, anything to say?
Yeah, I think, I agree with Greg here. We are a performance network. Everything we do is measured. Every landing page has a call button, drive button, URL button. We report all of that to our advertisers and the history of the companies, the search companies, so we measure everything anyway. Agencies, like to your point, is they look at things somewhat differently at times. They look at engagement rates and how much time you spend on the site. We have worked hard to get agencies to measure getting people to their stores, foot traffic, and all that.
Sure.
And I'm happy to say we have customers actually now pay us on secondary actions. Pay us when somebody drives to their store. And I think that is when the budgets will change from 1.5% of mobile spend to that 10% we're looking for.
Yep.
Because ultimately, mobile's biggest issue is lack of measurement. You can't, you don't have those cookies as you go online. You can't track the user through the purchase funnel. So how do you get there? And we do over 1 million call recordings. We look at call durations and all that stuff. So ultimately, the more we can measure, the better it's for the industry.
Great. I think that's a good way to segue into the next panel, which is all about data. So thank you guys. Please join me in thanking them. If you guys want to come on out.